So I can see that we've got some fantastic dentists in the audience, and this evening's webinar is really to talk about the process for dentists and pharmacists who wish to relocate to the UK. So we are very looking forward to supporting you guys, you overseas dentists, and helping you with this process. Some of you may have already applied to our applications inbox and received some information from our team. We are setting up a specialist team in order to support you guys with your registration and relocation process as well. So those of you who have studied at one of these universities may already have a recognised overseas qualification that is recognised by the General Dental Council. So obviously with all healthcare professional roles in the UK, it's really important to start the process with registering for your regulatory council that will be regulating your practice throughout your time in the UK. And so for dentists, that is the General Dental Council. And if you've studied at any of these universities and your degree is within the time frame that is set out on the GDC website, then you may have a recognised overseas qualification. So the first port of call would be to check if you have studied in any of those countries. We are launching a campaign at the moment for EU dentists. So we are planning to visit some EU countries in February next year, which is very exciting, and we are going to hopefully be meeting some of you EU dentists in person. At the moment we're looking to potentially travel to Bulgaria, Romania, the Czech Republic, and to Poland as well. But that itinerary could change slightly. And those of you who are an EU dentist who aren't based in one of those countries, you can apply with us to our apply at email address that my marketing team colleagues will also pop in the chat, and we can provide specific advice and support on your process as well. So you don't have to be resident in one of those countries, but if you are resident in one of those countries, then we may be able to meet you in person early next year, which would be very, very exciting. So EU dentists, again, you may want to check on the GDC website and check if your dental qualification is automatically recognised or near automatically recognised by the GDC. So there is a list, Annex V on the GDC website, where you can have a check of your qualification. And if your qualification is recognised, then your next step would be to make sure that you can complete the English language requirement for your post. So that would be either an IELTS certificate with the scores that are required by the GDC. If you have completed a recent primary dental qualification taught or examined in English, and a language test for registration in another native English-speaking country, or recent practice in a native English-speaking country. Now, of course, there may be some other ways that you could meet this English language requirement, and you may require specific or individual advice and support on this step of the process as well. And in that case, we are more than happy to assist you at New Professionals. And as I've mentioned, we will link you up with an individual recruitment consultant who can look at your specific case and advise you as much as possible with the process as well. And at that point, you would complete the online application on the GDC website. And there is also an annual registration fee to pay for the GDC as well. And so if you haven't yet met the English language requirements and you do believe that you will require an English language certificate, then our Do It programme is the absolute best opportunity for you. My colleague has popped the link in the chat. There is still time to register for this programme of free English language training webinars. So please do share that link with your friends and your colleagues as well, so they can benefit from this amazing opportunity. It did just start on the 11th of December and it runs for 4 weeks. So it's running for 2 weeks prior to Christmas and then 2 weeks in January. So it is 4 weeks of English language training webinars, which will provide an incredible boost to those of you that haven't yet met English language requirements as well. So those of you who are a non-EU dentist, so if you don't have one of those recognised overseas qualifications, or if you're not based in the EU, then the process is significantly more complicated for you. And many of you will be aware that there is currently an exam, the overseas registration exam, that is required by overseas dentists coming from other countries at the moment. So if you are one of those dentists that does require an overseas registration exam, at the moment, our vacancies are requiring that you complete full GDC registration before we are able to offer you an interview. However, we are aware that there has been a consultation ongoing around this exam and some changes. So we do obviously hope to update you guys as soon as possible, as soon as we hear about any changes on this. So do keep an eye on our Facebook page for any upcoming updates or more further information about this exam process. And as I've said, you can also pop your CV over to us and pop an email in to our apply at email address, and we'll be able to advise you there as well if you're not sure. So the process for dental care professionals, and this includes dental nurses, is also to obviously complete the English language requirement. And again, it's the same process as for dentists in terms of the IELTS certificate with the scores required by the General Dental Council, the qualification taught and examined in English, or a language test for registration, or recent practice in a native English speaking country. And then again, you would need to complete the online application, and for this you would need to provide proof of training and qualifications and submit evidence of meeting each learning outcome for whichever dental care professional role you are applying for. And again, of course, there are many different individual circumstances, different qualifications, and we are happy to review each case individually and provide individual advice and support to you as well. And so the English language requirements for each role are on the slide just here. So if you have narrowly missed the requirements, or if you just maybe have not quite met these requirements on a previous exam, but you were very close, then we really would recommend that you join our Do It programme and get that boost to your English language. Now, the Do It programme is not a full English language training course. It's not delivered by OET premium providers. It is delivered by our very own English language support specialists. So if you are able to, it is always a benefit to sign up for additional English language training and one-to-one support as well. But it will give you that first step on the ladder with the English language requirements. And as I've mentioned, we can also provide advice and support from a recruitment perspective as well throughout this process. So we've just popped on the slide here a few different routes for recruitment. So I think one thing that it's really important to make very clear is that an overseas dentist with a dentistry qualification is no longer able to register as a dental care professional unless you have a specific dental care professional qualification. So with your dentistry qualification, you're no longer able to register as a dental care professional. But if you do have one of those specific dental care professional qualifications, then that may be an option for you in order to register in the UK as a dental care professional. And as I've mentioned as well, we are particularly keen to hear from those of you who are EU dentists who maybe need some support to meet the English language requirements in order to register for UK practice as well. And now I'm going to pass over to the fantastic Claire, who is our resident expert on pharmacists. But I will mention that if those of you that have questions, we will be answering your questions at the end of the slideshow today. And if there's any questions that we can't help with, then we will be coming back to you afterwards. So please don't worry. And as I've mentioned also, we are recording this session. So if there's anything that you've missed, you can watch back the recording afterwards and share this with your friends as well. Over to you, Claire.
Thank you very much, Kerry. That's really interesting to hear about all the routes for dentistry. But yeah, I'm going to talk to you specifically about the routes for pharmacists. So similarly with dentistry, EEA or EU candidates are sort of the more desired candidates at the moment, just because the pathway for your recruitment is that much more straightforward. This is a rough roadmap of what it would look from like interview to arrival in the UK. So we would screen your CVs and look at your basic English language that you've got at the moment. And then we would sort of send your CV to the pharmacies in the NHS and get them to review it and see if they're happy for interview. And then we would book you in for an interview. Once you've got your conditional offer on employment, we would look at assisting you to get you through your OET training. So OET isn't one of the English exams you can do. It's the occupational English test, and there's one specifically for pharmacists. You can also do the academic IELTS as well, so you've got that option as well. Once you've got that pharmacy OET exam, that's when you can complete the General Pharmaceutical Council form to have your qualification recognised in the UK. So you complete this form. We would guide you through the whole process of completing that form. You send that to the GPHC and they would verify your qualification saying, yep, this person meets our requirements. And then you'd register as a pharmacist. We'd do your pre-employment checks. You'd get your certificate of sponsorship, visa, and arrive to the UK. That's a rough, very quick timeline of how it would work. And we'd look from anywhere between 16 and 20 weeks, depending on where you were at with your baseline English. If we take a quick look at what happens if you're outside the EA, outside the EU, it is significantly more complicated because the General Pharmaceutical Council doesn't recognise any other pharmaceutical degrees at the moment outside the EEA. So you would need to complete an additional course. So the first few steps are very similar in the fact you'd still have your interview, we'd still get you through your OET exam, but after that you need to do something called the OSPAP course. This is a year-long course that's conducted at a university, but even before you can get onto that course, you have to complete a form to make sure you're eligible for that course. Then you'll do the OSPAP course. The courses are notoriously difficult to get onto, but we are trying to work with universities where we can to see if we can boost the numbers on that. Once you've done that OSPAP course, like I said, it is slightly different in the fact that you wouldn't be able to register straight away for the General Pharmaceutical Council. You would need to do your registration training placement, and then you would need to complete the General Pharmaceutical Council registration assessment as well. And only after you've completed all of that would you be able to register as a pharmacist. So it is more complicated for anybody outside the EEA. Let's go on to the next slide. So I just want to talk very briefly about working as an NHS hospital pharmacist, because I found in my experience talking with other candidates and also living and working in other countries, in some countries it's very different to what a pharmacist does in the UK. So general hospital pharmacists in the UK, basically they work throughout the hospital. They might work in a specific specialty, or they might rotate and do sort of general, but they do go out onto wards. They do assess patients, they look at the drug charts, they will give advice and suggestions to the doctors, to the nurses, etc. So they are very much hands-on, very much patient-facing. Depending on where you're from, I know a lot of pharmacists that I've spoken to in places such as Spain, they tend to be more community-based. But in our case, we'd be looking for those pharmacists that were interested in working in NHS hospitals. So really being able to use your pharmaceutical degree to its full potential. And also the chances for advancement in the NHS are that much higher as well. It's working as part of a multidisciplinary team, communicating with other healthcare professionals, and also looking at risk and financial management as well. So it is a very diverse role in the NHS for pharmacists. The English language requirements are slightly higher than that of dentistry. They are on par with those that were required by the General Medical Council as well for doctors. So they are slightly higher. So they will accept the academic IELTS that we've mentioned before, and they would also accept the pharmacy OET. And those are the scores that we'd be looking for you to achieve. And you wouldn't be able to combine the scores. You'd need to do that all in one sitting. So at the very beginning of the process, when we first meet you, we would do a brief assessment on your English level at the time. We would get there's a little app we use called English Score that gives us a very good idea of your baseline. And then once we've got that, we'd be able to sort of tailor a course for you to work out how long you would need to get you up to the required level, which is obviously where we want you to be. And also that you'd only need to sit the exam once, maybe twice, to really get your head around the exam. So that would be the aim with the English language requirements. Okay, so that's a very whistle-stop tour of pharma. It's much quicker than what Kerry did with dentistry. But the process is relatively straightforward for anybody from the EEA. It just gets much more complicated when you're outside the EEA. We are trying to work with people to see if we can make this a little bit easier for you, but it is not. Things don't change fast with these councils, unfortunately, so we have to work within what we've got at the time. When we do go to the EU, so we do go to those European countries in Poland, Czech Republic, Bulgaria, Romania, there may be other countries that we visit as well. If you don't have the opportunity to come to an in-person interview, absolutely, please send us your application. You're absolutely welcome to send your application now, because we have got a few trusts that are definitely interested in interviewing pharmacists. So the more sort of CVs we get, we can send them to the trust and start getting things moving for you. So we really, as it says there, we really want to change your lives, get you over to the UK, get you advancing in your career in the NHS. We absolutely love to hear the success stories of you as you move through the NHS. Okay. If you've got any questions, please absolutely put them in the chat box. We can stay on and answer any of your questions. Myself and Kerry have kind of made ourselves subject matter experts on the two different specialties. We've been looking into exactly how they work and how to bring you over to the UK. So if you do have any questions, put them in the chat box, because we can't unmute your microphones. So put the questions into that chat box, please.
I'd just like to also mention that we are planning on doing some follow-up webinars with the recruiting organisations, so the NHS Trust that Claire has mentioned, who are keen to recruit pharmacists, and also the dental organisation, which is private organisation that we will be working with, who also plans to come to the EU to do some promotional conferences and appoint some dentists as well. So we will be doing some follow-up webinars talking about relocation packages and the support that will be offered by those organisations in terms of your relocation and recruitment as well. But for now, we just wanted to give you an overview of the process for dentists and pharmacists. And yeah, please do get your questions coming, and we will do our best to answer your questions.
I think there is one question here about pharmacy technicians. I haven't specifically spoken about pharmacy technicians because, again, the pathway is different. The qualifications aren't recognised in the UK for any overseas for pharmacy technicians. So you'd need to come to the UK and complete a UK recognised course. And because we don't have a huge amount of interest at the moment in pharmacy technicians, we've tried to focus our webinar today specifically on pharmacists, which is where the most interest is at the moment. I can also see a question about the IELTS then. I don't know, the IELTS do not, the German Pharmaceutical Council do not accept one skill retakes. You have to pass all 4 subtests of the course, so in reading, writing, speaking and listening, in one go, in one sitting. They won't accept clubbing and they won't accept single skill retakes, unfortunately.
So I can see a question here as well about registering as a dental therapist when you just have a master's in dentistry. So if you are a dentist by qualification and you don't have a separate qualification as a dental therapist or as a dental nurse, then you will no longer be able to register in the UK as a dental therapist or a dental care practitioner if you only have that dentistry qualification. So you would need to complete the overseas registration exam in order to register as a dentist. But as I mentioned earlier, there are some changes afoot at the moment. There has been a recent consultation on the process for overseas registered dentists, so we will keep you updated if that applies to you, if you're coming from outside the EU. and need further information on that process as well. So Mansoura, for dental hygienists, as we've mentioned in the slides, there is a process. It is quite a lengthy process. You do have to demonstrate that you meet all of the learning outcomes. You have to submit your application, but we are happy to support you with that. So do please send us your CV, and we can also support you with the English language requirements as well. As we've mentioned, it would be helpful to you to join the Do It programme in the initial phases to kind of boost your English language level. If you haven't got if you're not able to meet the other English language requirements, such as having studied your qualification in English, then you would need to complete the English language certificate. And same advice for you there, Christy, as well, from the Philippines. So the first port of call would be to meet the English language requirements, but also our team can support you with the registration for dental nursing as well. And just scrolling down.
I've just seen a question about licensing and registration. So that's a really good question. I'm sorry I didn't mention that when it comes to pharmacists. So in order to qualify to register with the General Pharmaceutical Council in the UK, you absolutely do need to be registered in the EU country, for instance, where you completed your course before you can come and work in the UK. I know there is a question about newly qualified. At the moment, we don't know if they will consider newly qualified, but as far as I'm aware, as long as you are registered in the country where you completed the course, and you are from an EU country, because it just makes things a little bit easier at the beginning, then you may be considered. Yes, they are always going to prefer people with experience, but that doesn't mean it's an absolute definite that they won't consider you. So definitely, please still send us your CV, because if we've got these really good CVs that we can send to the trust for consideration, it just helps to move things forward as well.
Cameron, thank you for your question. It sounds like you might have quite specific circumstances. I believe it has to be your primary dental qualification that was taught and examined in English. So you might not quite meet the English language requirements, but please do send us your application so we can provide more specific advice and support on your individual situation there. And just having a look. So you do need some experience in order to be able to register with the Dental Council. It depends what role you're applying for, Dora, but we will again we'll be able to advise on specific circumstances if we are able to see your CV and your specific information there as well. Quite a complicated question again from Aya, and I think, Aya, that you have been liaising specifically with our team via email as well. So I think it's best to look at your situation on more of an individual basis rather than me going into the complexities of that in the webinar. Just having a look through as well. So Nonfundo, in order to see if your specific qualification is recognised, please do check the GDC website, and there are lists on the website of all of the recognised overseas qualifications. And so then you'll be able to check if your specific university is there and your specific qualification as well. And Christy, that the specific list of requirements does mention the IELTS for the GDC, but I believe there is some flexibility there. So if you have demonstrated if you have done an OET with very good scores, then it's possible that you might be able to use that. But we would probably recommend that if you haven't yet taken the exam, that you took the IELTS exam, because that is the one that is specifically mentioned on the GDC website. So do consider taking that if you haven't yet taken the exam. And any other questions from anyone? Just feel like we've whizzed through those questions.
If you do have, we haven't answered your question, Jane, you have any specific question about your qualification or anything like that, absolutely, please do send us your CV to apply@newprofessionals.com, and myself or Kerry can review it and give you more specific advice, because obviously it's really difficult in the chats for very, very specific circumstances. But we really are keen to help you. So if we get a chance to look at your CV in depth, it will just allow us to give you better advice. But yeah, the NHS is very keen to have some experienced pharmacists coming to work, just as they have very keen to have some experienced dentists coming from overseas as well. And we really want to support to get you over here as well.
Absolutely. Somebody has got their hand up. Unfortunately, we're not able to unmute you or allow your cameras because we are recording this session. So if you have got a question, do please pop that in the chat box so that we can answer your question. We are more than happy to answer your question if you just type it in the chat box. But we are not able to allow your mic or your camera at the moment, I'm afraid. So Dr. Saif, you would only be able to apply as a hygienist if you had a specific qualification in that specialty. So not using your dentistry qualification, not using your dentistry degree, is my understanding. We can kind of contact GDC, or you can contact GDC to double check that. We're happy to do that depending on your specific circumstances. But our understanding is that you do need a specific qualification as a dental care practitioner, as a dental therapist, in order to register via that route.
So Pono, so I've seen your question about pharmacy technicians. Because at the moment we don't have any specific trusts that are looking for pharmacy technicians specifically, what you would need to do is come to the UK and complete the course on your own at present. This may change, but at the moment the NHS trusts that we're working with are only really interested in sort of registered pharmacists at the moment. Getting loads of questions coming in now. I've just seen a question from Christiana. So you're almost registered with the council in Albania, but you'll be licensed in July. You do need to do the IELTS or OE test before you apply to get your qualification recognised by the GPHC. So when you apply, you literally send everything, all your experience, all the details of your qualifications and proof of your English. Once they've got all of that in their application form, then they will assess it. And the assessment actually takes 28 days from the point that they've received it. So it does take a little bit of time, but what you could do in the meantime is start studying and preparing for your IELTS or OET test. So when you're licensed in July, it would be around that time that you hopefully get through your IELTS or OET at that point. So you'd be kind of on track to arrive in later in the summer or September, October, etc. So it's not like you can't apply until you're fully registered, but it's just that you can't apply to the General Pharmaceutical Council until you are registered as a pharmacist in Albania.
Thanks. Simji has asked, is there any age limit to apply? Now, the NHS doesn't discriminate. It's an equal opportunities employer, so it doesn't discriminate based on age or disability. So basically, yes, you can apply at any age for these vacancies. Obviously, your recruitment consultant will discuss with you about the about NHS pension schemes or the opportunities for the particular organisations that you're applying for as well. So that is something to consider. But no, there's no age limit for your application. You can drop us your application and we will get in touch with you. In terms of further updates, please just keep an eye on our Facebook page. We will be posting any additional updates. You're now, by signing up for this webinar, you can also be joining our mailing list so we can provide further updates there as well. Or if you send us your CV and your application to our apply@ email address, then hopefully we can link you in directly with one of our recruitment consultants who can also provide advice and support. And Mansour has asked about how we support with the registration and the process as well. So basically, as I've mentioned earlier on in the webinar, we do have a team of recruitment consultants, many of whom are international healthcare professionals themselves, so have been through this process themselves and are best placed to advise you on the requirements that you would need to provide. They will check all of your documents for you to make sure that the documents that you're submitting to official bodies are valid, and also help you with advice and support on things like they can advise if you need to have documents translated, and not only that, we would aim for you to receive a conditional offer letter from a recruiting organisation as soon as possible, which means that if you do have to pay things like professional fees, like any of the costs that you need to expend during this recruitment process, that you would hopefully have some kind of relocation package confirmed that would mean that you would be reimbursed some of those costs. Certainly, the UK visa costs are usually covered up front by the employer. Flight costs might be covered as well, depending on the organisation. And as I mentioned earlier, we might be organising some additional follow-up webinars with these recruiting organisations so you can understand the next stage of the process. But we at New Professionals will support you with all of your pre-employment checks for that employer, so making sure that you've met the requirements for English language, but also all of the other employment requirements, things like police check certificates and visa requirements, which is very difficult to do on your own. And it's our bread and butter. We love to help you guys with this kind of thing. We have a dedicated compliance team who will make sure that no stone goes unturned when we're checking all of these documents to make sure that absolutely everything is right and that there won't be any delays or difficulties that you would experience through the relocation process as well. So that's how we aim to help you with the registration as well and the relocation. So hopefully we get to help you and support you, Mansoura, as well.
Absolutely. I've just seen another question here. It's a very interesting one because I honestly say I don't know the answer, but I'm sure we can find out. You've asked that you're working as a regulatory affairs pharmacist. I would assume that does count as experience, but it's not something that I could decide. It would be something that we could send your CV to the trust and let them decide. What I do recommend you do is when you complete your CVs, make sure you put as much detail in it as possible. So don't just say where you're working and your job title, put your role and responsibilities, because it will just help the trust understand a little bit more what your base of experience is and if you are suitable to apply. Because if you just put your job title, it can mean something very different in the UK compared to what it means in your country. So by putting your roles and duties, the trust will be like, okay, so now I know what you're doing as a role. So I definitely recommend you send your CV to us. We can take a look and also pass it on to our colleagues at the NHS Trust to see if they would consider as well.
Thanks, Claire. So as Claire mentioned, if anyone thinks of any more questions, you can reach out to us via email. You can pop a message on our Facebook page. Or our Instagram, and do please keep in touch with us. If you're not ready to apply just yet, that's absolutely fine, but keep an eye on our Facebook page. If you are ready to apply, then do just send us your CV and your English language certificate if you've got one. If you haven't, don't worry, just send us your CV to apply@newprofessionals.com and we can link you in with someone who can offer advice and support. So really so fantastic to see so many of you this evening. Thank you for joining us, and as we mentioned, do please share the recording of this webinar with your friends. We will be sending the link round to everyone who registered for this webinar very soon afterwards, hopefully within the next 48 hours or so. So do please share it, and if you do think of anything else, don't hesitate to get in touch. Thank you again, everyone, for joining us this evening, and have a lovely evening or rest of your day wherever you are in the world. So thank you.
Thank you very much, everybody. It was lovely to meet you and hear your questions. Have a great evening and a great rest of your week as well.
Thank you, everyone. Goodbye.
Thank you. Bye.